The wind in Chicago doesn't just blow, it hunts. It finds every gap in your coat, every inch of exposed skin. And it bites down until you can't feel anything but the ache in your bones. It was 20 below zero. A record-breaking polar vortex had turned the city into a frozen wasteland. And I was standing outside my own apartment building, staring at a keypad that refused to blink green. I typed the code again. 4 digits. My birthday. The same code I'd used every day for 3 years. The light flashed red. Denied. My fingers were already stiff, clumsy inside my gloves. I looked down the alleyway beside the building. There, buried under a fresh layer of snow, were black trash bags. A lamp I recognized. A box of books. The cardboard already soggy and collapsing under the weight of the ice. My life. Discarded like garbage. My phone buzzed in my pocket, the vibration startling against my frozen leg. I pulled it out. A text from my sister. Shelby, Mom said you need to learn resilience. Enjoy the fresh air. I stared at the screen. The cruelty was so casual, so precise. It wasn't just an eviction. It was a sentence. They knew the forecast. They knew the danger. And they had locked me out anyway. Before I tell you what I did next, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what the weather is like right now. I'd love to know who's out there. I climbed into my car, my teeth chattering so hard I thought they might crack. The engine groaned, protesting the temperature. But it turned over. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, watching the windshield frost over from the inside. I didn't want to make the call. I knew, deep down, what the answer would be. But survival instinct overrides pride when the wind chill is 30 below zero. I dialed home. My mother, Pamela, answered on the second ring. Her voice was warm, soft, the sound of a woman sitting by a fireplace with a glass of wine. Hi. Morgan. D.A. Mom. I managed, my voice shaking. Shelby changed the codes. My things are in the snow. I'm locked out. Masher. There was a pause. Not a pause of surprise, but of patience. Like she was waiting for me to catch up to a conversation they'd already finished. We know. Honey, she said. Shelby called us before she did it. We talked it over as a family. End quote. The air in the car felt suddenly thinner. You knew? Mom. It's a blizzard. They're closing the highways. I have nowhere to go. It's Texans Provosters. Morgan. Listen to me, she said, her tone dropping into that reasonable, educational register she used when I was a child. You've been stagnant. You rely on your job, your routine. As on us. We realized we weren't helping you by letting you be comfortable. Resilience isn't built in comfort. Sweetheart, it's built in the storm. In a tilted stir, I heard my father, Douglas, in the background. His voice was booming, muffled slightly by distance, but clear enough to cut. Don't coddle her, Pam. She needs to hit the bottom to find her footing. Let her figure it out. In one, you heard your father, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. The self-satisfaction of someone delivering a hard truth for the greater good. We love you too much to rescue you from this. Good luck. Morgan. It's Increase. The line went dead. I stared at the phone. They were in the brownstone. My brownstone. The historic home in the Gold Coast district with the radiant heating and the heavy oak doors. They were warm. They were safe. And they had just sentenced me to freeze because they thought it would be a good character-building exercise. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. The cold had numbed everything. Even the panic. I put the car in gear. I couldn't afford a hotel. Shelby had timed this perfectly. Rent was due in 2 days. And I had just paid off my student loans. leaving my account hovering near zero until payday. I drove aimlessly for 20 minutes, the wipers fighting against the accumulating ice, until I saw a neon sign flickering through the whiteout, a 24-hour laundromat. I pulled in. I dragged the trash bags from the alley into the fluorescent brightness of the shop. It smelled like cheap detergent and wet wool. It wasn't home. It wasn't safe. But it was warm. I claimed a plastic chair in the corner, wedged between a vending machine and a row of industrial dryers. I watched my frozen clothes spin behind the glass, round and round, going nowhere. Just like me, I pulled my laptop out of my frozen bag. The battery was at 12%. It was enough. My phone pinged. A notification from Instagram. Shelby was live. I shouldn't have looked. But I tapped the screen. The video load was pixelated at first, then sharpened into high definition. Shelby was standing in my apartment, my former apartment. She was wearing pink safety goggles and holding a sledgehammer. "Welcome to demo day. Guys," she chirped, beaming at the camera. "We are finally getting rid of this depressing energy and making space for the new walk-in closet. Say goodbye to the sad beige." She swung the hammer. It smashed into the drywall of my bedroom. The comments rolled in. "So satisfying, Queen of Reno, love the initiative." I watched her destroy my sanctuary while I sat in a plastic chair smelling of bleach and despair. And in that moment, the sadness didn't just fade, it evaporated. It was replaced by a cold, hard clarity. For years, I had asked myself why I let them treat me this way. Why I stayed the designated fixer. The silent wallet. The emotional punching bag. I realized then that they hadn't just taken advantage of me. They had programmed me. It's what I call the invisible chain of the survivor. When I was 21, my grandmother died. She didn't leave the brownstone to my father, her own son. She left it to me. She knew who he was. But the day the will was read, my parents sat me down. They didn't congratulate me. They burdened me. They told me that ownership was just a technicality, a heavy responsibility that I held in trust for the family. They convinced me that charging them rent would be a betrayal, that eviction was a violence only monsters committed. They forged a chain out of my own empathy and wrapped it around my throat. They taught me that my stability was a resource they were entitled to mine. I believed that being good meant being used, but looking at Shelby swinging that hammer, destroying the only roof I had, the chain snapped. I wasn't their daughter anymore. I wasn't their sister. I was their landlord. And I was their creditor. I opened my email. I didn't type a frantic plea for help. I typed a directive. I am Lond. Family Estate Attorney. Subject: Immediate action required. Property 404 North State. Marcus. Please prepare an emergency eviction notice for the occupants of the brownstone. Citations: unauthorized renovation, failure to maintain premises, and immediate owner occupancy required. I want it served within the hour. Also, pull the file on the equipment financing loan for Vance Manufacturing. Reference number 89942. I am exercising my right as the primary guarantor to demand removal or immediate liquidation of collateral. I hit send. I watched the message sent banner flash green. My battery dropped to 10%. I closed the laptop. The hum of the dryers seemed to change pitch, sounding less like a drone and more like a countdown. I wasn't freezing anymore. I was just waiting for the fire to start. They found me 40 minutes later. I had forgotten to turn off the location sharing on my phone, a digital leash I'd agreed to years ago under the guise of safety. Headlights swept across the glass front of the laundromat, blindingly bright against the snow. An SUV jumped the curb, blocking the entrance. It was my father's Range Rover. They didn't walk in, they invaded. Douglas led the charge, his cashmere coat flapping open in the wind, a crumpled sheaf of papers clutched in his fist. Pamela followed, dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue. Shelby brought up the rear. Her phone already raised. The red recording light blinking. The few other patrons in the laundromat, a night shift nurse and a guy sleeping in the corner, looked up. Alarmed. I didn't move. I didn't stand. I just watched them come. What the hell is this? Douglas roared, slamming the papers onto the folding table next to me. It was the eviction notice Marcus had served. You're evicting us? From our own home? It's not your home, I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, flat, devoid of the tremor that usually accompanied any confrontation with him. It's my property. And you're trespassing. And he was. We are your family, Pamela wailed, throwing her hands up. How could you be so cruel? We raised you. We put clothes on your back. And then you locked me out in a blizzard. I replied, the clothes on my back are currently the only ones I have, because you impounded the rest. That was Estina stage. Shelby shoved her phone camera into my face. Guys, look at this. She narrated to her live stream, her voice trembling with manufactured outrage. My own sister is trying to make our parents homeless because she's jealous of my renovation. She's having a total mental break. With versus divida. Put the phone away. Shelby, I said. Or what? She sneered. You'll evict me too? You're pathetic. You think a piece of paper makes you the boss? Douglas loomed over me, using his height to intimidate. A tactic that had worked for 29 years. You are going to rescind this notice right now. He spat, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. And you are going to call the bank and explain that the demand for the loan removal was a mistake. A clerical error. Do you hear me? He was screaming. He was shaking. And as I looked at him, really looked at him, I realized something profound. He wasn't strong. He was terrified. Psychologists call it a narcissistic injury. It happens when a person who views you as an extension of themselves, rather than a human being, suddenly hits a boundary. They don't feel guilt for hurting you. They feel victimized because their property is malfunctioning. They aren't screaming because they care about the relationship. They are screaming because their sense of control is shattering. And without that control, they are nothing. I wasn't a daughter to them. I was a load-bearing wall. And I had just walked away. I hear you, I said calmly. But the answer is no. End quote. Douglas froze. The denial hit him like a physical blow. The eviction stands. I continued, meeting his eyes. And the loan demand stands. You have 72 hours. Douglas, I suggest you stop screaming at me and go call your accountant. Enter Aziste. You ungrateful little... He lunged forward. Raising a hand, the guy sleeping in the corner stood up. He was big, wearing a mechanic's jacket. Hey, he rumbled. Back off the lady. It's de very teleges. Douglas looked around, realizing for the first time that he wasn't in his living room. He was in a public laundromat. And he was losing. He sneered, straightening his coat, trying to reclaim some shred of dignity. You're dead to us. He hissed. Don't come crawling back when you fail. End quote. I won't, I said. They retreated. A chaotic storm of slamming doors and revving engines. I watched them go. My heart wasn't racing. My hands weren't shaking. I felt light. I looked down at my laptop. An email had come in from Marcus. Drafts approved. Richard, your father's silent investor, has scheduled a crisis meeting for tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. at the manufacturing plant. He wants to know why the primary guarantor is pulling support. I checked the time. 3 a.m. I had 6 hours to prepare for the execution. The Vance manufacturing headquarters was a sprawling brick complex on the outskirts of the city. A testament to Douglas's ego. I parked my newly retrieved car in the visitor lot, the heater blasting against the lingering chill in my bones. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. Dark circles. Yes, but my eyes were clear. I walked into the boardroom at 5 minutes past 9. I wasn't invited, but as a primary guarantor. I didn't need an invitation. Douglas was already there, pacing the length of the long mahogany table. Richard sat at the head, a man of few words and even fewer smiles. He was reviewing a file folder, his brow furrowed. When I entered, Douglas stopped pacing. "She's here to apologize," he announced to Richard, his voice tight with forced joviality. "Just a family misunderstanding." Emotions running high. I'm not here to apologize," I said, taking the seat opposite him. I placed my laptop on the table and opened it. "I'm here to finalize the separation of assets. I will ultimate it." Richard looked up. "Morgan, your father says this notice regarding the loan removal is a mistake. Is that true?" "It is not a mistake," I replied. I projected a document onto the wall screen. It was the equipment financing agreement, dated 8 years ago. My signature was on the bottom line, next to Douglas's. I co-signed this loan when I was 21 because the company didn't have the credit history to secure the new machinery. The principal balance is $85,000. I am exercising my right under the Material Adverse Change Clause to demand release. "It's prison and torture. Material adverse change?" Douglas scoffed. "Business is booming. The adverse change is personal." I said, "The borrower you has evicted the guarantor me from her primary residence during a severe weather event, demonstrating a lack of stability and judgment that endangers the collateral. Every potises, and into scared." Richard's eyes narrowed. "You evicted her?" "It was a renovation issue," Douglas stammered. "It was a lockout in a blizzard." I corrected. "Richard, I am formally requesting that my name be removed from this loan. If not, I will be forced to petition for the liquidation of the secured assets, the machinery, to satisfy the debt and clear my liability." And Resses, he cased everyone. The silence in the room was heavy. Liquidation would stop production. It would kill the company. "You wouldn't," Douglas whispered. "I would," I said. "It's just business. Dad. Tough love." Then, Richard closed the folder. "Douglas, we can't afford a liquidation. If she wants off the loan, she's off. We'll refinance internally. I have offers." "Thank you," I said. Douglas looked defeated. He pulled a pen from his pocket, his hand shaking. "Fine. You win. I'll sign the release. We'll pay the $85,000. Just 80 process." He leaned over the table to sign the document Marcus had prepared. The pen touched the paper. "Wait," Richard said. His voice was quiet, but it stopped the room cold. He was looking at another document in his file, one I hadn't projected. "Morgan," Richard said slowly, "while we're cleaning up the books, what about the expansion loan from last June?" I frowned. "What expansion loan?" "The one for the new warehouse facility," Richard said. $150,000. You're listed as the co-signer on that one too. And Cation. I felt the blood drain from my face. I never signed for a warehouse loan. It scraped us off. Douglas, froze. The pen slipped from his fingers and clattered onto the table. Richard pulled a sheet of paper from the file and slid it across the mahogany. I looked down. There, at the bottom of a promissory note dated 6 months ago, was my signature. It was a good forgery. The loop of the M was perfect, but the gay was wrong. I always loop my gees. This one was straight. "That's not my signature," I said. I looked up at Douglas. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at the wall, his face gray. "Douglas?" Richard's voice was dangerously calm. "Did you forge your daughter's signature on a bank loan?" It was just a bridge loan," Douglas stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. "I needed the capital fast. I was going to pay it back, before anyone noticed. Morgan. You know I'm good for it. You committed fraud. Richard said. He stood up. This isn't a family dispute anymore. Douglas. This is a felony. And it puts the entire company at risk. I can. Richard. Please. Douglas begged. Reaching out. We can fix this. I can. No. Richard said. He picked up his phone. I'm calling the police. And then, I'm calling the bank. Is one of Daffer go, it's set to fresh. He looked at me. Morgan. I suggest you stay. You're going to be a witness. And, I watched my father crumble. The arrogant titan of industry. The man who had lectured me on resilience. Was reduced to a trembling mess in a boardroom chair. He had tried to bury me in the snow. But he had forgotten one thing. The snow melts. And it reveals everything hidden beneath. The police arrived 10 minutes later. Richard had already secured the files. And I had already given my statement. I watched as they escorted Douglas out. His head bowed. Not in shame, but in defeat. He didn't look at me. I walked out of the building and into the cold. Crisp air. The sun was shining, reflecting off the snow. Blindingly bright. It was over. The settlement for the first loan hit my account 2 days later, $65,000. Richard insisted on it. A severance package for my years of unrecognized service. I used it to pay off the mortgage on the brownstone completely, ensuring that no one could ever leverage debt against my home again. The eviction went through without a hitch. Pamela and Shelby moved into a 2-bedroom apartment 3 towns over. Shelby lost most of her followers when the truth came out, not because I posted it, but because the court records were public. And the internet loves a villain. I moved back into the brownstone a week later. I changed every lock, installed a security system, and blocked every number associated with my former life. The first night back, I sat in the living room with a cup of tea. The house was quiet. The wind howled outside. But inside, it was warm. Safe. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who would have apologized for surviving, who would have carried the weight of her family's failures until her back broke. She was gone. In her place was someone new. Someone who knew the value of her own name. The silence wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. If you've ever had to choose between your family and your peace, share this story. You never know who needs to hear it.